My name is Frédéric Simon. I'm the Energy and Environment Editor of Euractiv.com, and I will be your host for today's second panel discussion, which is titled The Role of Green Molecules in Europe's Decarbonisation Journey, Transitioning to the Fuels of the Future. Now, this debate is extremely timely, of course, with just a few weeks to go before the European Commission tables its much-awaited gas decarbonisation package, which forms the second leg of the 55 package that was presented earlier in July. So, what is the role of green molecules in Europe's decarbonisation journey? And what can be the role of cogeneration as well in that context? To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of welcoming here in person Eva Abramiuk-Lété, General Manager of Liquid Gas Europe, Harmen Dekker, Director of the European Biogas Association, James Watson, Secretary General of Eurogas, and then joining us online, Boyana Achovski, Secretary General of Gas Infrastructure Europe, and Jorgo Chatzimarkakis, Secretary General of Hydrogen Europe. Welcome to the view and thanks for joining us today. We'll start this conference with short opening statements from the speakers, and then we'll move on to a Q&A discussion that will also include questions from the audience. To put a question to the speakers, just use the chat function on Zoom and we will take questions directly from there. I think that's all for me when it comes to the introduction. So without further ado, let me pass on the floor immediately to Eva Abramiuk-Lété.
Good morning, everyone. Pleased to be here today, and thank you to COGEN Europe for inviting me to this very important discussion about the role of green molecules. When I received the title of the session, obviously the obvious answer, what is the role of green molecules, is an important part of the future of decarbonization of the heating system, but not only that, also of all different types of systems and applications. And just to introduce ourselves, Liquid Gas Europe represents LPG industry, but not only, also bio-LPG and renewable LPG, as well as other drop-in solutions and gaseous solutions that can be used in the LPG infrastructure. And that is a very important part because I think a lot of industries are currently looking into how to utilize the infrastructure in the long term. Bio-LPG and renewable LPG is a very important part of this journey towards reaching 2050 net zero scenario and targets. LPG today emits up to 40% less of CO2, and bio-LPG can offer up to 80% less CO2 emissions. So this is definitely going to be an important part of our industry journey towards 2050 and beyond. There's much to be done, and I think we're going to discuss some of the things that needs to be done together with our colleagues today on the legislative front and also from the industry side. Definitely scaling up the production and investing in research and development will be an important part of this journey. But we need to make sure today that our legislative framework is set to support those gaseous fuels, not only LPG, bio-LPG, renewable fuels, but all different types of gaseous fuels, which can play a humongous role in reaching those targets and give consumers a lot of different types of choices. One thing maybe for the opening statement, electrification of heating is not always possible everywhere. Our customers in based in rural areas and often other solutions like macro cogeneration is a fantastic choice for those consumers, a cost-effective choice and also more efficient choice. So with that, I think I'll let also my colleagues to speak about other parts of the other gaseous fuels. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me turn then straight away to the next speaker, and that's Harmen Dekker.
Well, thank you. And also from my part, many thanks to COGEN for this invitation. And actually, very good to focus on the green molecules. I'm representing the EBA, the European Biogas Association. We are an association growing and accelerating actually in growth very, very fast over the past few years. And we make actually renewable natural gas, if you like, with an association representing a little bit over more than 7,000 stakeholders. We are well represented within Europe. And what we see is that actually biomethane is within the molecules at the heart of, say, the transition to be done. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult for us to explain what we do, not because it is renewable, because we are so multifaceted, so versatile in what we do. So let me try to quickly paint the picture. First of all, we can treat waste and organic waste streams. And from that, we derive the organic renewable gas, which can be used. That is the first part. But with the waste streams, we can even make sure that we revitalize the soil and play an important role also in the carbon farming. And that is also an important part to make sure that we can increase the renewable gas we need also in the future. The last part is actually that we can even capture the CO2. And we can capture this biogenic CO2 and make sure that this CO2, the carbon which is in there, we can use again for the future. And that is, of course, very important for the chemical industry, but also for the greenhouses to make sure that there is CO2 for the plants to grow, and also for the heating and the cooling. All that is sometimes a little bit difficult to explain, but it shows that we are actually a fully circular solution within what we are going to need within Europe. COP26 was clear. We need to start now. There is no time to wait, really. We can't wait for solutions for tomorrow, and we can start now. And biomethane is one of them. And I just would like to urge all the policymakers and everybody who's listening, don't wait, just make sure that we can start and contribute with localized solutions, as well as other solutions, hydrogen also in there, to make sure that we can contribute to the goals of 2030, but also 2050. Thank you.
Thanks, Harmen, Dekker. Let me turn now to James Watson for the introduction statement.
Thanks, Frédéric. And thanks to COGEN. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. And it's great to see an event that is dedicated to discussing the role of green molecules. I think a few years ago, there was a doubt about what the role of gaseous solutions would be in the climate change agenda that we are indeed implementing here in Europe. And I think that it's now very much accepted that electrifying everything is not going to be the route that we need to take to actually achieve our carbon objectives. So we are going to see very clearly a focus, as Frédéric mentioned at the beginning, through the gas package and Fit for 55, on how we can develop green molecules. And also in Eurogas, we are keen to see the development of low carbon molecules as well. But nevertheless, I think the argument about whether or not there will be any or not is over. It is now only a question of what they will be used for and how far they will penetrate. Indeed, as we would see them in Eurogas, as the second pillar alongside electrification. Obviously, we see that by 2050, electrification will have taken place and electricity will be the largest vector. But green molecules and low carbon molecules will be the second most important vector. I would pick a little bit up on what Harmen said, and I think that biomethane will be extremely valuable in the overall battle to defeat climate change. And I say that because it is also recognized as an important mechanism to reduce methane emissions. Our sector, of course, has to address methane emissions. We have to make sure that we are reducing methane, given its nature as a powerful greenhouse gas. But biomethane has the great strength of actually being able to use the waste from agriculture, which currently contributes to methane emissions, and actually turning that into a renewable resource that is fantastic to use in almost any end-use requirement. So I think we will see that biomethane, even beyond the fact that it reduces CO2, very importantly, will also reduce methane emissions, and that's going to be an important element. Both Ava and Harmen have both mentioned heating. It was in my list of things that we have to talk about, because what are the end-use sectors where we'll see these green molecules? There is a lot of debate, and indeed, even probably in the last panel, we have people who are saying that they imagine that heating will be all about electricity. I can tell you that from my own experience, I was in Berlin at the end of 2019. I was with Vattenfall, and I was with them where they were changing a coal-powered combined heat and power plants, so cogeneration. So I have to mention that, ladies and gentlemen, today, because that's what we're here for. They were changing that to a natural gas burner. Huge support from the local population to do that. 100,000 people were connected to this district heating grid. It was district heating grid. That turbine that they were putting in, brand new turbine, could run on 30% hydrogen. They have wind farms nearby. They can build direct line to. They have the space built for the electrolyzer. There is no doubt in Vattenfall's mind that that CHP plant will indeed provide gaseous fueled solutions for heating that will include hydrogen. Hydrogen will be part of heating. So this is something that is very clear to me. I think it's very clear to other speakers who are yet to speak on this panel. And those decisions have already been made. So I always find it quite funny when people are saying hydrogen will never be in heating. It's already planned to be, and definitely in district heating. I think the only final point I'll make in my opening statement is to say what I said at the beginning. It's not just about green molecules. We also believe that there will be the necessity for low carbon molecules. And we think that low carbon molecules will be important, and we need the right framework to develop them, to build up a volume. So eventually we can turn these into renewable fuels. But to start with, we need the right gateway. And the gateway to drive down cost will also be to use low carbon hydrogen. And so I think when the gas package comes, one of the things that we hope for in Eurogas is that we want to see a proper legislative framework to make that happen. If it doesn't happen, meeting our climate objectives will be extremely expensive, and that will drive more public resistance. Thank you. Thanks, Frédéric.
Thanks, James. And let me give the floor now to Jorgo Chatzimarkakis from Hydrogen Europe.
Many thanks for the invitation. Many thanks for giving me the opportunity to make, well, an initial statement out of the hydrogen perspective. We have seen so many booms, hypes, and fashions. I remember very well the biomass and biofuel hype beginning of the 2000s. And we have seen also an interesting hype, which was called all electric. And we can clearly say the all electric hype is over, because people understand, policymakers were fascinated by the idea to switch from 80% molecules and 20% electrons to 100% electrons. But this is physically not doable. Policymakers have understood. That's why we are now, I think we are seeing the end of hypes and fashions, and we are seeing an understanding that we simply need to recognize there will be probably maximally 50% of electrons, maximum, because raw materials are an issue, and the circular economy will need 50% of molecules at least. So 50-50, yes, but the molecules need to be clean and green. And this has been understood. This is very, very important. And after the Fit for 55 package, which was about the green molecules, we are now waiting for this winter package, or they call it even hydrogen and decarbonized gases package. And here I would like to bring into the debate 3 categories that need to be looked upon, plus a half. The one category we talked about is the renewable category, is not clearly defined yet in Fit for 55, but we will work on that. The other 2 are the no carbon category, and I'm saying no carbon because I mean no carbon. It's any hydrogen that has more than 90% of decarbonization. So 1 kilo of hydrogen, 1 kilo of CO2 emission, that's the maximum. And you can reach this with different technologies like pyrolysis, like ATR technology. And of course, the upcoming French presidency has another idea on that is also an option. The third category, and I was fascinated to listen to Harmen, is the minus carbon category. And here it's key for us to work together with EBA, because biomethane that is then turned into hydrogen and has basically absorbed CO2 from atmosphere or from biogenic sources, that is then the possibility to really, really reduce the carbon content in the atmosphere, because that has a minus effect. These are the 3 categories that are important, plus the low carbon category. Low carbon is anything that produces then more than 1 kilo per kilo of hydrogen. That is something which in the transitional phase will play a very, very important role, but should be degressively outgoing. Now, when it comes to cogen and heating, my message is a very, very simple one. The message is everybody has the right to life. Everybody has the right to water. Everybody should have the right to hydrogen. Why can we exclude sectors? I'm sometimes stunned when I listen to debates, especially in Germany. James already alluded to them, but sometimes also listening to the Commission. I'm very, very sorry. Sometimes we should fact-base our things. I think this excluding heating from hydrogen or from other gases, you could run stationary fuel cells also with biomethane easily, and then change it gradually to hydrogen or leave it with biomethane because biomethane is net neutral. But these people are not listening to facts because it's the last battle of the all-electric guys to say, this we want to keep for us. No, the market is not going to let you do that. The people who want to have access, James mentioned an example in Berlin, they are not going to let you do that. The costs are the driver. You cannot put heat pumps everywhere because you should put them in new built houses. Please do. Please don't consider other solutions. But if you have a house to refurbish, and that's the vast majority of all the houses, please don't consider only heat pumps. Please consider other technologies. And here is what I want to say. Everybody should have the right to hydrogen, including the heating sector. We are fighting for that. And I think in the end, the consumers will opt for that because that's the cheaper, better, and also more climate neutral option, at least at the moment and for a long time. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Jorgo. And let me turn now for the last opening statement to Boyana Achovski from Gas Infrastructure Europe.
Thank you, Frédéric. Hello to everyone. Hello to my colleagues around this discussion. It is really a pleasure to be talking to you today. I represent GIE, which stands for Gas Infrastructure Europe. And this is our message to Europe today. So the first thing, we can power a climate neutral society. Second thing is that we can uplift the change with our present and also with our future infrastructure. The third thing is we really stand for an economy that works for people. In fact, our members work to innovate every day with transmission, with storage, and also with LNG terminals. In other words, we provide solutions and services for decarbonization with infrastructure for renewable, for low carbon molecules, including also hydrogen, including natural gas, and also including biogases. So we have 70 members from 27 different countries around Europe, and we as an association really perfectly embody the multiple pathways that we have in between the different European regions towards the decarbonization. So we very much recognize the different speeds of the different members, and we are very much aware that in the next decade, natural gas will play an important role to enable the member states to phase out coal. And this is also provide a flexibility for the electricity systems. It will help sectors to electrify, so that the sectors which is very difficult for them, and those sectors that can become really a climate neutral. So our vision by 2050 is that the assets that we are operating, the gas infrastructure, will be really the backbone of a kind of a new energy system which is innovative, which is very well integrated, and is very reliable. And of course, as many of the people said here, with the right policy framework, with a proper intensivize, we can put in place, we can allow the society to benefit from really a very well developed, efficient and sustainable supply of energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Boyana. And we can now move to the Q&A session. Turning to the audience online, if you want to put a question to one of our speakers, please use the chat function on Zoom. We'll take questions from there. So let me get the debate started, if you allow, with a question to you, Abramiuk-Lété. Looking at your sector, specifically LPG, how is your sector planning to hit net zero emissions by 2050? What roadmap do you have? And where do you see LPG playing the most significant role when it comes to decarbonisation? Are there specific end users where you think it will add particular value?
Thank you. It's a lot of questions in one, so I'll try to be very brief in answering that. But in February 2021, we have actually put out a study, which I encourage you to have a look at our website, which looks at the pathways towards 2050 for bio-LPG. We think that by 2050, with the decrease of the consumption, obviously in Europe, we will be able to reach 100% bio-LPG and renewable LPG. So we as a sector can be 100% bio. So that's our pathway. We have very different production pathway. Today, the commercialized one is HBO biodiesel production, and also production pathway that results in sustainable aviation fuels. But we have a lot of pathways that still need to be developed in order to reach those goals in 2050, from power to X to gasification. So there is a lot of different options for the industry to reach those targets in 2050. But as I said initially, we need the right regulatory framework. And Boyana, I think, also confirmed that for natural gas. And also the green molecules in there. And that includes a lot of work on the current Fit for 55 package and a lot of changes in that. When it comes to the applications of the future, obviously hard to predict, but as we hear today discuss the heating, I believe that in heating, gaseous fuels and LPG will play a very, very important role. Not all areas can be electrified. And I have to repeat that once again. Our consumers are mostly in rural areas. We represent around 20 million of people who consume LPG. We have almost 700,000 businesses that use LPG, and around 8 million petrol stations that are currently in Europe. So we have an important role to play for those consumers living in off-grid rural areas, and also those consumers that are often vulnerable. They're in fuel poverty very often, so they tend to use our fuel in order to have a decent life. And I think we need to look at 2050 also from that perspective. One is the carbon perspective, but the second one is the social aspects of the change and how we make sure that we get to 2050 with those cost-efficient solutions.
Thanks, Eva. Let me turn to Harmen Dekker now for the second question about the volumes of biogas and biomethane. They're still relatively small today as a percentage of the wider demand for gas on the market. So where do you see production 10 years from now, and in which sectors do you anticipate most of the demand?
Thanks for the question, and again, a lot of questions in one. But if we look at the total production as we have right now, we produce in energy and then translate to the billion cubic meters of natural gas already 18 billion cubic meters of biogas. 3 billion cubic meters is now biomethane, but we can easily transform this and all the rest also to renewable biomethane. Now, the other part is electricity and heat. Shows again the versatility of our industry. This part, this 18 billion cubic meters of energy, is being built in a period of 9 years. We are now in 2021. We are going to reach our need to reach our targets in 2030. And already various reports, and that can be the International Renewable Energy Agency, CERI, Delft, so various Navigant report as well, have already said we can reach 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane in 2030 and up to 125 billion cubic meters in 2050. Actually, this represents around 30 to 40%, depending on the total gas need, in 2050 of the total gas consumption within Europe. And so if we look at where the rest is being, that will be renewable hydrogen, and we have biomethane in those applications. Enough to go for.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to Jorgo Chatzimarkakis for the next question. Jorgo, as the Commission said in its hydrogen strategy last year, 96% of hydrogen today is made from fossil fuels, a lot coming from natural gas, with very little still now coming from renewable or low carbon sources. So where do you believe the proportions will be in 2030 or 2040? And crucially, how can we get the required volumes available on the market as quickly as possible?
Many thanks for that question. Indeed, when we pursue our replace strategy, we don't only want to replace coal and oil and gas by hydrogen. We also want to replace gray hydrogen, that's the hydrogen you mentioned, the fossil-based emitting hydrogen, 1 kilo of hydrogen, 9 to 10 kilos CO2. That's why I mentioned in my initial remark, the 1-to-1 dimension. So 1 kilo of CO2 emissions should be the utmost. And by the way, even renewable hydrogen and even renewable production has a carbon footprint. Let's not forget that. However, it should be defined as renewable, and we are absolutely okay with that. Now, the strategy of the European Commission with regards to hydrogen foresees a short-term target that's until 2024-25, 6 gigawatt, and medium term until 2030, 40 gigawatt in Europe and 40 gigawatt outside Europe, but with the direction of Europe as a consumption market for the hydrogen thereof. We can clearly say that we will fail to meet the short-term target. So in 24-26, the 6 gigawatt are quite difficult, but we will overshoot by far and maybe more than double as much and much more than double as much the midterm target 2030. Why? Because the renewable infrastructure that we need to produce electricity that we need for the production of the renewable hydrogen needs to be built up. Permitting procedures, licensing is too slow still. And of course, there are also other recipients for the electricity than just hydrogen. That's why there is a certain discrimination of hydrogen already foreseen in the Fit for 55, which we criticize. I mentioned it in the very beginning. But once we are up and running, and once we have overcome the so-called kick-off phase in which we are now until 25, we will see 10 years of a ramp-up phase. So this is the time where basically certain market conditions will be prepared, 25 to 35. As of 35, we expect hydrogen to become a commodity. And we need that be treated as a commodity with all the regulatory framework that a commodity has, but not before, please. Before we need some digressive special treatment because it's new. And then in 2050, we will cover the 20%, even more, of the whole energy mobility heating market, 20 to possibly 25%, but 20% is the target here. So you see, it is something that goes clearly into this direction. Maybe one remark to Eva, because she was referring to biomethane as a basis for LNG. Synthetic is also a very important. So synthetic gas, which comes from hydrogen renewably produced, plus biogenic CO2 from bio-waste, is the perfect alternative to do what you do with biomethane anyhow, to liquefy it. It depends on the region. It depends on the geography, where exactly you are. Sometimes it makes sense to have synthetic fuels or biomethane, synthetic methane and biomethane. Sometimes it's the opposite. It makes sense to split biomethane even into hydrogen and this very precious green CO2 that Harmen and his association is basically producing. We will see also different categories for CO2, or just this is a side debate in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jorgo. And let me turn to James Watson now for the next question. So there's a lot of talk, obviously, about the need to decarbonize gas. How far have you actually gone? Have percentages moved a little bit in the past 2 years? So maybe you can update us on that. And when do you think you'll be able to say that fossil gas is behind us? So the moment when you'll have more than 50%, which coming from renewable or low carbon sources, and what will it take us? What will it take to get us there?
Well, I think that I'll take the first part of the question first. I think what we can see is that over the last few years, there have indeed been quite significant developments of biomethane. In particular, Germany was one of the leading countries that deployed a lot of biomethane, but more recently we've seen France. And France is a growing area for biomethane. And the reason for that is the regulatory framework. They set themselves a target of all of the gaseous fuel that they consume should be renewable 10% by 2030. So you've got a 10% renewable energy target, if you will, purely for gas. This driven investment, so many different players are investing in it. And so France is a really good example where you see year on year, almost 100% growth on the amount of biomethane plants that there are. So from this point of view, we can say, how do you drive it? It's the regulatory framework. This is why all of the organizations that are here today, actually all 5 of us, all support the idea. In one form or another, you will go, I'll give you your opinion, but in one form or another, we would like to see targets being deployed to see the growth of things like biomethane, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, because that's what will make the investment decision certain. You need to have that security. So we are growing. Perhaps if you compare to electricity, so well, it hasn't been as fast, but to be honest, that's where there's been a big focus, first and foremost on wind and solar. I think that now that we understood that you can't electrify everything, there is a much greater focus on how we are going to develop those green and low carbon molecules. And so we are looking at the policy framework that will help us. It's not just France, by the way. I mean, we can go around Europe, Austria, they have targets too. You look through the hydrogen strategy and you will see targets for deployment of electrolyzers by 2030, including Germany, Italy, Spain. So there is a big momentum now in the deployment. So I think that we are catching up and we will see quite considerable amounts of green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and biomethane by 2030. We could probably argue with Harmen about how much figures we see. In fact, we would probably be more bullish even and say you can probably go beyond 35 BCM by 2030 in biomethane if you get the policy framework right. That's the only thing that really matters. Can you get the policy framework right? If you can, then we're on a fast track. We're in the fast lane and we can move. So I can say that we are very, I think, realistic, but also very optimistic to say we think that this will now, in the next 10 years, see great breakthroughs in biomethane and in hydrogen. And I think this is basically backed up by things like the hydrogen strategy that we see. I would agree with what the International Gas Union said recently, and that is that we need to move biomethane up the policy priority list because it is a major source of renewable gas that is available today. Now, let's come to the second part of your question about how fast can these grow and at what point do you see a tipping balance between natural gas and those gases. I have to smile and laugh a little bit because I get my crystal ball out. It's a bit difficult to tell. What we can say in Eurogas quite specifically is that by 2050, we do not believe that there will be any unabated natural gas burnt. It's not possible. It's not compatible with a 2050 carbon neutral regime. So we would imagine that there would still be some natural gas in the system at that stage, utilizing carbon capture and storage. We would say that probably Harmen's suggestion of around about 30-40% could be biomethane is also true. There would also probably be 30-40% hydrogen to make you happy too, Jorgo. Then there will be that rump. And this is not just Eurogas fantasizing. Our crystal ball can look at what the European Commission's crystal ball says, and it's basically in the same place. The only figure I can give you from the European Commission is that today we have a gas market, as you said, around about 300, 400 BCM. The view of the European Commission is that by 2050, the market will only have shrunk by about 19%, i.e. 81% will still be there as gaseous fuels from this market, which will involve Ava's, Harmen's, and Jorgo's, as well as a rump of natural gas. So there will still be all of those things in the system at 2050. And if I can have one final point,
Sure.
because the questions were given to others. In Eurogas, we are absolutely adamant on this. It is not a question of saying it'll go to this sector or that sector. It will be determined by the markets, and all sectors will be able to access the gaseous fuels they need. Off-grid, Ava's absolutely right. On-grid with biomethane, hydrogen, industry, transport, heating. Why are we even thinking about where these things should go? To me, it's very clear. They go where they should go. And different regions and different localities will use hydrogen in heating as they will use biomethane in heating. So I think it's kind of it's a red herring to worry about where are these gases going to go. The reality is local communities will decide, just like the community in Berlin that said, we will have a change from coal to natural gas, and that natural gas in itself will change to hydrogen in the future. This is what people will want, and this is what people will need. So let's not fight about, is it going to be in heating or transport or whatever? It doesn't matter. People will decide, and it will be in all end use.
And the tipping point, you see that happening in the late 2030s or even the 2040s?
It's going to be after the 2030. Again, I go back to the European Commission study, which says that between now and 2030, the natural gas market will decline, but not massively. There will be less, and we accept that. Energy efficiency, there are many reasons why there will be less gas consumed in 2030 than there are today. Between 2030 and 2050, some sort of tipping point will come, Frédéric, but I honestly cannot tell you what day or date or time of the afternoon it will be. But we do believe that that is the direction of travel, between 30 and 50. Between now and 2030, natural gas will be the dominant gas. Between 30 and 50, there will be change.
Boyana, Achovski, a question for you, a little bit challenging. There's a lot of talk about building a dedicated hydrogen infrastructure. Jorgo, Chatzimarkakis is actually driving that discussion to some extent. So we've seen a lot in terms of announcements and presentations and projections about having a dedicated infrastructure. And when are we going to see, you or somebody else from the industry cutting the ribbon on the first project?
As soon as possible. I mean, what we are doing as the infrastructure operators is that the good thing is that we are very much looking on the perspective to innovate with all the solutions. So, we have a number of solutions. Of course, we have a possibility to have a dedicated hydrogen network. We have also the potential of blending hydrogen. We also have the repurposing. We also have a very good examples, which are coming from the Netherlands, when you have 100% natural gas pipeline, which is 100% dedicated now to transport hydrogen. Basically, a lot of innovative projects, which are from the TSO side, then from the storage part, when you have a lot of potential showcase already on salt caverns, depleted fields, and the possibilities that our members are showcasing with bio-LNG and how we can decarbonize also and find a solution to transport hydrogen with LNG, which will be a possibility to have a biggest volumes will come from different sides of the world. But when we talk about, let's say, this dedicated hydrogen network, so basically, a pure hydrogen network will be, of course, needed to transport a large amount of renewable hydrogen in the future, and that will give a possibility really to connect the supply and the demand centers. But we see solutions actually for both. For repurposed gas infrastructure that will have a possibility really to integrate 100% hydrogen, as also very much newly built hydrogen pipelines, right? So it should be a kind of a good balance between those options. However, I would like to return, of course, to the point for the cost efficiency which is important when we talk about the social acceptance, of course, with the whole processes. And this week we talk about a lot about this social acceptance. There is a huge advantages of building on existing infrastructure, of course, when developing a hydrogen backbones. And there are studies which really shows that the repurposing saves up to 80% of the cost compared to the newly built pipeline. And of course, this also saves time. So as I mentioned, the social benefits in this perspective will very much increase the acceptance of the people of the energy transition, because we cannot really afford losing such acceptance in this important transition period. Thank you.
Boyana, maybe just a quick follow-up on blending. How do you see blending happening in different regions of Europe? Is the infrastructure ready for that? Or do you see infrastructure changes that need to happen for blending to happen as well?
Well, indeed, the blending is really one of the opportunities to integrate hydrogen to the energy system, of course, and it is a solution which, indeed, it's a kind of a favorable option for different regions, considering a different technical feasibilities. But it provides a cost-efficient tool to quickly enable the decarbonization, which, considering these different speeds within the transitional period. Again, if we talk about studies, because I also see that many of the colleagues are very much referring to that, generally some of them are showing that a relatively low hydrogen, let's say, concentration. So there's points that you have a low hydrogen concentration, you can have up to 10 or 20% in volume. So blending in such kind of cases may not require major investment or modification to the infrastructure, and it can be done in a very, very safe manner, which is a very important point. And for this is actually the reason that many members are very much in favor of that option. But still, beyond the thresholds, the checks will be necessary, and the infrastructure will be very much likely to require an adaptations in this perspective.
Thanks, Boyana. But very, very quickly, it's an issue that came up recently, at least for me, and I'm not a specialist, but the question of hydrogen potentially leaking from infrastructure. What can you say about that? Is that something that you monitor? And is that maybe a source of concern for the industry?
Indeed, we actually also saw an interesting article in Euractiv in this perspective, which we definitely are going to debate. We have a board meeting next week where this is actually going to be one of the part of the discussion. So, of course, low carbon gases, renewable gases provide different significant decarbonization advantages if you compare to the more fossil-based molecules of natural gas and oil, of course. But gas and hydrogen leakage needs to be monitored, needs to be reported and verified across the value chain. So we need to start and engage in such kind of discussion, because probably something that it's a new topic that needs to be very well seen from every aspect and angle. And definitely in this perspective, we will do the same efforts as we are doing with the other initiatives within the GA members, as we are very much active on methane emission leakages. So basically, we should have a similar way of taking a look on the matter.
Thanks very much, Boyana. Let me pick up now a question from the audience, and I think this one will be for you, Harmen Dekker. It's about biogas, and the question is, why is biogas not widely supported in Europe and included into the next generation EU financing program? Only biomethane is mentioned, but this technology is not always applicable. A lot of small farms could get great benefit in using their waste to produce biogas and then electricity. You would probably agree with that, I guess.
Hard to disagree, I would say. What can I say? It is. I started off my first sentences when I was here. It is sometimes a difficult story to tell when we have so many advantages, and politicians like to just say, "Oh, this is the energy way." That's how electricity has been promoted. This is how, where Jorgo was alluding on, so many waves of new technologies were there, and we were always a little bit like this cuddly, nice part in the back, but we don't have to support that so well. we now see that we are so versatile and we can contribute actually in a very big way. And we can contribute not only on the renewable energy side, but also on agroecology, so the soil improvement, as well as in capturing the CO2. Now we see that this is being echoed. So only now. And I just, James was saying this, we are in a flow, we are being seen as a renewable gas, so also green hydrogen. But it's time, it really is time now to make sure that it's not the words the politicians are saying, but we need to transfer that to legislation. So yes, the taxonomy needs to be strengthened also on the biogas side. Yes, the RED 2 and all the changes into the RED 3 needs to change to make sure that this is being recognized to the full potential, actually with the scientific numbers which we have behind it.
Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience, unless somebody else wants to comment on this issue, maybe James Watson on this. Why is there this discrimination between biogas and biomethane?
I think Harmen's covered it perfectly, and I wouldn't necessarily see it differently. I think what I would say is that for us, we see biomethane as a much more valuable gas because you can actually use that in the gas system today. Biogas is often used to produce electricity. It's low grade, it's not been upgraded. So that's another step that needs to be included. But now I think Harmen has covered this absolutely correctly. I think that sometimes why people think differently between biogas and biomethane is because of the different end uses that are possible for them, because you don't put biogas into the gas grid because it hasn't been sufficiently upgraded. But still, I think it's kind of false discrimination, I suppose is the way that I would describe it. It's not necessary to behave like that. Different gases have uses, perfectly legitimate uses for different things. And biogas will be needed to be burnt in electricity, at least by most studies, into 2050 and beyond. So we should be encouraging that.
Okay, another question coming from the audience. Though it is not a gas, what does the panel think about the role of green ammonia? Who wants to have a go at that? And that would be Jorgo.
Indeed. So the role of green ammonia is very, very huge, especially in shipping. Now, what is ammonia? Ammonia is, we call it a derivative of green hydrogen. So renewably produced hydrogen from renewable sources and electrolysis delivers H2. And if you take nitrogen from the air, which is abundantly available, you get NH3, which is ammonia. Why is it important? Because at the moment, Boyana was alluding to the infrastructure and the backbone. The infrastructure is not hydrogen ready yet. But what about all these projects that start already, especially in sun-rich areas, to produce hydrogen, I would say like hell, and how to transport it to Europe? They would use ammonia as a carrier, so to say, because it's cheaper than other options. Why? Because we have an infrastructure. There are ships that can carry ammonia. There are bunkers in ports that can store ammonia. So this is a quite cheap option at the moment to overcome the missing logistics. Once the pipelines are built, ammonia will not anymore be the carrier, but it will continue to be important, green ammonia, as a fuel for shipping. Why is it so? You can, with green ammonia, you can fuel cells, but they are for short distances rather. And you can also fuel two-stroke engines for long distance shipping. And that is regarded in the shipping industry. If you take the biggest producer of ship engines, MAN in Augsburg, they are starting to not only look into that, but to produce into that direction. So that is why green ammonia plays a very, very important role for the rollout of the hydrogen strategy. And it will stay. It will stay as an important fuel in long distance shipping. Thank you.
Can I simply complement to that? Indeed, we as a LNG infrastructure operator, indeed, we look at 4 options to decarbonize. And this is one of the options, indeed. It's about the upstream hydrogen. So this is a hydrogen which is being produced, and LNG infrastructure can really convert this to receive a different hydrogen carriers. And this is like liquid hydrogen and, of course, ammonia. So indeed, Jorgo was very, very precise of what he was saying here about this. Thanks for that, Jorgo.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe.
You wanna add something?
If I may, I think it's fair to say if we are looking to ammonia, which has its precious role, I almost would say with regard to hydrogen, we also must not forget the two other molecules which are needed, especially within transport and maritime, which is biomethanol and bio LNG. And what you see is those three molecules will be the main molecules in the future for shipping. The shipping will not be decarbonized only by bioenergy, but we do see an enormous uptake of bioenergy currently within the shipping. Biomethanol will play a role. We see also some shipping industries doing that, and bioammonia will be there as well. So we have three molecules there.
Do you see rising demand already now coming from the shipping sector for bio-LNG and these molecules?
Yes, there is a very large demand. Don't pin me on the numbers, but the numbers I heard was 29% of all the ships being built now is being built with renewable engines, of which, when I quote it right, 95% is now with LNG engines to be made ready for bioenergy. And what we see in the bioenergy production within Europe, which is coming from biomethane, we see an enormous acceleration into the production.
I can just add, in our rhetoric, what we know is that there are more ships that are going to run on gaseous fuels being built than are on the sea at the moment. So there's going to be a huge amount of demand in the maritime sector for gaseous fuel to run ships. So the future in this sector, at least, is very clearly going to be molecular.
Just to add on maritime, because it's been an uptake of use of LPG in maritime as a fuel. We have right now 100 ships. I know it's not a lot, but for our industry, it's a lot. And green ammonia, definitely, we are looking into that, how to integrate it in our current infrastructure already today. So it's an interesting molecule. Okay.
I'll stick with you for the next question, and that's looking forward, of course, to this coming gas decarbonisation package, which has been in the making for a number of years now. It's been discussed already almost ad nauseum. So we're finally getting this package now on the 14th of December, I understand. Eva Abramiuk-Lété, what are your expectations from this package? Do you expect something like a clear roadmap to decarbonisation by 2050 with specific policy support for your sector?
So for the gas package, I think I will leave that to my colleagues to comment on that. But I wanted to just to refer to one part of it, which is the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which is a very important one for us. And my message would be that that legislation need to allow for different types of heating appliances to be available to consumers in Europe. So it's not only electrification. We believe that gas boiler phase-outs and bans are not the way forward. We need to give consumer a variety of choices. And my call would be to offer this technology-neutral approach in the upcoming Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. On the gas packages, obviously more referring to other molecules. That's why I'm leaving that for my colleagues to comment.
So Harmen, Dekker, maybe a few thoughts from your side and expectations for the gas package.
The crystal ball again, isn't it?
Well, it's not crystal ball. It's what you would want to achieve the objectives that you've set for yourself.
Yes, so within the gas package itself, I think it must be clear that it needs to be interlinked towards what the other part of the Fit for 55 is already there, so the RED II needs to have a clear interlinkage. And clearly, we would like to see that there is a target for renewable gases to be put in there. The target is very important, like we have the targets on fuels already, like there was a target on electricity. We would like to see there is a target for renewable gases. That would really spur the development, but having said that, it needs to be interlinked with all the packages. But it seems sometimes that the packages are a little bit standalone and not speaking to each other. So we must make sure that all those packages are aligned and renewable gas is being promoted in them.
James Watson?
Yeah, sure. I think that, to be honest, the way we see it is it's more of a kind of It's not expected, it's what we need. And I think that what we need is a proper framework for the decarbonisation of the gas vector. I think that Harmen's picked on the main point that we would say, yes, renewable gas target, also a target for the decarbonisation of the gaseous fuel pathway to 2030. I mean, we're talking in ways we think it's like 2020, that's 10 years away. In fact, it's 6 weeks to 2022. We're 8 years from there. I mean, there needs to be that recognition from the European Commission when they make this proposal that time is moving very quickly. Gaseous fuels are needed, so we must have a very strong regulatory framework to drive the decarbonisation. And absolutely right, this must not be a vacuum. This needs to be fully integrated into the already existing proposals. And so what we would really hope to see is that there is a recognition for the role that gas will play in the different end vectors. We think that it's important that we maintain the market that we have, and that the market is allowed to operate and continue to operate. We'd agree with what Jorgo said before. Hydrogen will need some exceptionalism, and they will need to have exceptions to some of those market rules because it is a nascent technology and it must grow. And so we do see a need to treat hydrogen differently to natural gas, at least for a time, and not forever. And I think Jorgo also alluded to that. But that's what we would expect to see. We'd expect to see a package which recognizes the good work that the gas market has achieved, but allows a framework to develop the next generation of gases into big scale them up, give us targets, give us the exemptions that we need, make these technologies grow.
Regarding targets, my understanding, but I haven't been following that as closely as you have, is that the Commission is quite reluctant to put them. So if you don't get the target, then what? What is the thing that's going to replace the target if you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of the policymaker in this case to drive this market? Because the objective, I think you share it with the policymakers, both of you want renewable gases to expand, but targets are not the right way forward from the point of view of the Commission. So what can replace that?
Well, the Commission likes to use sectoral targets, as we see in the Renewable Energy Directive. So they've talked a lot about their preference towards sectoral targets. So we'll have to see how they address. Will they? I mean, I think they are saying we're not interested in the global targets, but we like sectoral targets. Now, this would be an entirely new departure in terms of the gas package if they're going to create sectoral targets for the role that gas will play. But we have to wait and see because we don't know how they're going to address it. But the message is in line with what you've understood, Frédéric. We like your proposal. We like to see the gas industry being progressive, but our preference is sectoral targets. We have them, as we see, in red. Let's see what they do for the gas package. Let's see what they approach for hydrogen and low carbon hydrogen in the gas package. These are questions that we really don't have the answer to. We would prefer the global. If we get sectoral, we'll live with it. That's political reality. We'll live with it and we'll make the best of it.
Okay. Jorgo, Chatzimarkakis, your own expectations when it comes to this gas package, which is coming up now.
I will pick up on what Harmen just said with regards to Fit for 55. It needs to be basically be linked, and there we are missing a clear definition of renewable hydrogen, as I said. So this is an opportunity to possibly, by defining the other hydrogen sorts of hydrogen, I mentioned no carbon, minus carbon, and low carbon, by clearly defining them, we might also have a better view on what is renewable hydrogen. Then this is the basis for guarantees of origin. Why am I saying that? Because we as Europeans will have much more demand on hydrogen and the derivatives of hydrogen than we can produce. That is why we need to have clear rules what to do with imported, how to look transparently into imported different sorts of hydrogen. That's very important. And that's what we expect. I would pick up on something that you asked James and Harmen with regards to unbundling or not unbundling. So the regulatory framework. Here, we believe that it doesn't make sense to exclude hydrogen forever. But as I mentioned already, as of 35, you could apply similar rules. Until then, we need a special treatment. I would like to pick up one thing on hydrogen leakage, because it was part of the debate. You have seen the big interest in methane leakage by the European Parliament, by the COP in Glasgow. So everybody talks about it. It's a little bit very sensitive and politically very sensitive issue. However, we want to avoid that the same spirit will somehow influence the hydrogen leakage debate, because there we are building at the moment some statements on very, very dodgy elements of scientific knowledge, to be clear and honest. And that's why I fully agree with Boyana. We look into it now. We look into it with a scientific eye and not with an ideological eye. Because again, and I'm quite clear in what I say now, the hydrogen leakage debate might be abused by some people to build up an issue that only serves to go back to the all-electric scenario, which is dead. The all-electric scenario is dead, buried by the IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, that clearly says globally it is not possible. So how could it be in Europe? And that is why we should be scientifically based and clear, fact-based here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorgo. And let me turn to Boyana Achovski now for your expectations regarding the upcoming gas decarbonisation package.
Well, there was so much said by my colleagues, with which I agree, of course. I think we need to have a very much a proper intensive for guaranteeing investments, for sure. Guarantees of origin was also something that was mentioned. Well, from our perspective, maybe we should step a little bit on the recent knowledge, for example, of infrastructure operators, on the way that we know already how to operate, how to transport, store, etc. Also, when we talk about unbundling processes, that could be also something that we could take into consideration. Could be taken into consideration of the knowledge that we are having already. And indeed, sector coupling, this is a topic where GA was always very much involved, of having kind of voicing this need of having a holistic view, as of course the electrons and molecules, as we see, are going to very well shape the future energy system.
Thanks, Boyana. Let me now introduce a topic that we only very briefly touched upon, which is the sustainable finance taxonomy. That is going to be actually the topic of the next panel discussion, which is about financing. So I'd like to get your views about the first delegated act that was published in April by the European Commission. What is your own assessment of it? Do you believe it went in the right direction? And of course, there's now a second delegated act, which should be coming in the next few weeks. We don't know, of course, exactly what's going to be in there, but gas will be addressed. So maybe we can start with you, Abramiuk-Lété. Your assessment on the first delegated act, and maybe thoughts on the second.
So just for clarification, we are observing that on sidelines as the LPG industry. For us, it's very important that the sustainable gaseous fuels can still apply for or can be included in the taxonomy and for future investments. But I think it's a big question is about the natural gas, and I think that's where the biggest question is. And I think as part of gas naturally, where both Liquid Gas Europe and Eurogas we came up together with several statements on taxonomy. But I will let James to comment on that, because it's mostly touches the natural gas, and we are kind of there on the sidelines. But definitely a clear message there is that we need to make sure that natural gas, but also other gaseous fuels can benefit from those future investments, and so that the new projects can be developed and can be supported. And taxonomy is a very important tool to do so.
So, James Watson.
Thank you, Ava. Thanks, Frédéric. I think that to answer the first part, the first delegated act, the first taxonomy, I think we could say that in principle, the treatment of biogases, inclusion of carbon capture and storage, inclusion of infrastructure, inclusion of methane emissions, fully support it, welcome it. Of course, the controversy at the time was, what do you do with natural gas and nuclear? And they were both taken out. So if you want, the Commission sidestepped the issue and gave us a package of progressive measures for the future. So all of the renewable gases, including even carbon capture and storage and upgrades for infrastructure, are considered to be sustainable. And that's good. So I don't think anybody on this panel will argue with that. I think we all say the first one is fine. It is, of course, the big question about what you do. The elephant in the room, if you like, was shunted into the shed, and now they're going to bring it out, I believe, any week now, is what you do with natural gas. I would say, look, let's be pragmatic about this. Gas turbines are going to be built. It's a fact. Poland's going to need them. They simply are. So many other countries, Bulgaria, Romania, many other countries as well, even Belgium and Germany will need them. Now, you have a choice. You can make those CCGTs more expensive so that the people of those countries have to pay more for them, or you can give them their real value, which is a transition tool, which can also be used with decarbonized gases in the future. Why would you simply make people pay more for an investment that's going to happen anyway? This, to me, is not logical. It's not the sort of thing that builds support for the energy transition, because you will need those peakers. You will need natural gas. Transition. Totally accept it. It's a transition. Let them build them. Don't make them more expensive just to satisfy a few niche interests and make more people suffer by paying more for things that are going to be done. This is completely irrational.
There was one suggestion in an interview I did not so long ago with Pascal Canfin, where he said some of the conditions that could be put on gas to be considered as a transitional fuel would be only if it comes in replacement of coal. Do you think that's a fair suggestion, proposal?
I think we have to see what the suggestions will be, of course. And when we're looking at replacing things like solid fuels, like coal, then of course we feel that that is a very strong business case for using natural gas. Now you can take that one category, one criteria on its own, if you like, but it depends what the overall criteria are. Because in this paper and some of the suggestions that Canfin have made, when you add up all the criteria, it still amounts to quite a massive hurdle to jump to actually make the investments. So what we need is sensible criteria that come together to make it possible to invest for those technologies without making them unnecessarily expensive for what will already be done, as I say.
Harmen, Dekker, your views on the first delegated act and maybe the second.
First of all, I have to say that within my team, I'm definitely not a specialist. So I think I can only echo also what James had said. Maybe just a few words on biogas and biomethane. We know that within the first delegated act, it was supported to some extent. However, there were a few strange wordings in it that actually went more, made it more rigid and went even beyond the RED II. And that is very strange. The RED II is scientifically based, it is fully there and is sustainable. So everything is already sustainable there. Why would you make it more difficult whilst it's not scientifically proven? We have just announced, one of our members announced 4.6 billion euros investment within biogas biomethane. Why would you try to make that more difficult? So I just hope that in the second delegated act that has been taken out, more aligned with the RED II, so that we can start making an impact.
Jorgo, Chatzimarkakis, your views about the first and potentially second delegated act.
First of all, my congratulations to you, Frédéric, for keeping this panel here really on a very high level. So it's cool. However, I have to both delegated acts a comment to make. With regards to taxonomy, I would say we need a prioritization when it comes to after COP26. It's crystal clear now that the world goes into a clear direction. Paris was a little bit fluffy. Glasgow is clearer now. But the main target needs to be not sustainability, but climate compliance. It needs to be climate compliant. If it's not climate compliant, and I give you an example, it's absolutely sustainable to kill the woods in Brandenburg and to build up a gigafactory in the midst of a water protected area. That's taxonomy-wise, that's super. In fact, it is absolutely not sustainable. So here, it might be a little bit climate compliant, not if you look at the red 2, where there are a lot of loopholes for electricity from carbon, from coal, sorry. So you see, it's not coherent. That's why we need to stop talking about this fluffy concept of sustainability. At the same time, if there is sustainability, it's something which is circular. That's where the notion comes from. And then the Commission should really look to circular aspects, and molecules help much more to circularity than anything else. But you need to keep them circular in combination with electrons, and that's possible. That's number one. With regards to the infrastructure that needs to be supported by that, you yourself, Frédéric, you have in your publications alluded to a meeting that happened in Germany, new German government, new German chancellor, possibly as of 6th of December, who addressed Germans, telling them, I will go out of coal, I will stick to go out of nuclear, I will stay in gas. I will not let the Germans freeze. Clear statement. And then Mrs. Baerbock, the vice chancellor, possibly at least the representative of the Green Party, said, yes, we need to support this, but these pipelines have to be hydrogen ready. Wow. This is a 180-degree turnaround from what the Greens said before. This is wow. And I listened to the Green group in the European Parliament, and they were astonished, but they understand this is climate compliant much more than anything else. To the second delegated act, I rather will not become emotional. I just say it cannot stay like that. We want to have additionality as a paramount given. We need additionality. Without additional renewable resources, it will not be possible to reach all the targets. However, on the other hand, if this leads to a checking mechanism every 15 minutes, you need to check whether using power from the power grid is additional as of 2020. Every 15 minutes, this is not rational. And this is rather a tool to jeopardize, of course, hydrogen business, and this doesn't help. So here we need to readapt. I'm confident, and I really believe that the policymakers in the European Commission have this in their mind, but still there is the proposal to go for a complicated mechanism on the table. I want to believe that it will not be presented like that. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think to wrap up today's panel now, I'll give the floor to Boyana Achovski. So if you can share your thoughts about the first delegated act of the taxonomy, and maybe some thoughts as well about the second.
Well, the importance is that the complementary delegated acts really facilitates the investments, which very much contributes to the climate goals in a very sustainable way, as sustainable as possible, of course. So if that will not happen, the investments will still take place, because for the gas grid stability, there will be a need for significantly more expensive, making higher emitting technologies more, let's say, attractive in the short term, right? I would like to very much thank James that took this, how to say, responsibility on behalf of this platform where we with Liquid Gas Europe also stand together. So I'm having a possibility to take a look on, let's say, the recent messages that we would like to put forward. And indeed, the gas-related activities should have an access to green and transitional finance, so they can fully take up the role as a powerful decarbonization lever to accelerate the transition of energy systems. So with this final sentence, I was very precise of our intention in relation to the taxonomy. Thank you.
Thanks, Boyana, and thanks, everyone. I think we've now reached the end of this second panel discussion for the day. We'll now take a 30-minute break before moving on to the next panel discussion, focusing on CHP market opportunities, trends, and financing solutions. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 30 minutes with a different moderator.